Today will go down in history as Indhu Rubasingham's first press conference as artistic director of the National Theatre. But for me, Sarah Crompton,
and me, Alex Wood,
on the WhatsOnStage podcast. In fact, it's the first day we've been back in the same room since Alex became a father, so it's a double cause for celebration. And we have literally just walked out of the National Theatre where Indhu has been going through her season with her co-executive director, Kate Vara. And the thing that struck both of us was the mood of the room. I mean, it might be helped by the fact that it's an incredibly sunny day and everybody arrived to a rather nice small breakfast of granola and croissants, which always helps. But it just had a sense of relaxation and celebration, which was noticeably different, I think, than press conferences that I've been to under Indhu's two predecessors, Nicholas Heitner and Rufus Norris, and neither of those were anything but enjoyable and interesting. But the mood was different with this one. Did you feel that as well?
The word that I would use coming out of it was giddy, I'd say. There was quite a lot of jokes in the room, jokes about the programming, jokes about the name of the National Theatre, Indhu making jokes about her career so far. It all felt incredibly amicable, but also that everyone in the room was fighting the same fight and on the same team.
Yeah.
It didn't feel adversarial, or no one was hunting for that gotcha answer to try and wrong foot Indhu. It was all about congratulations for some excellent programming, which we'll run through in a sec.
Yeah.
And let's celebrate you as a dynamic and exciting force for UK theatre and world theatre, really, for some of the stuff that she's got planned and some of the things she was talking about.
And I thought she set that tone immediately because obviously with a press conference, just to, pull the curtain back a bit, press conference, people usually read from a script. It was all quite formally set up. We're in a little room called the Cottesloe Room, which is just next to the Dorfman Theatre. And there was a script and there was a trailer that was played and there was a formality to that setup. But the first thing she did when she came in was saying that she'd been thinking back to all the times that she'd talked to different journalists. She talked to Baz Bamingboy, who works for Deadline, talked to Fiona Mountford of The Independent, and the fact that she'd told Fiona Mountford that she would never be an artistic director about 18 years ago. And she said she was nervous and she'd been thinking about these things overnight when she woke up in the watches of the night. But that saying we're in the same community and how lovely it was all to be together and she could talk about it, that set the tone. And also her personality is really interesting in how she deals with questions, because Rufus was always very open, but I felt quite anxious. Nicholas Heitner was a brilliant career diplomat, with an answer for everything. And if he ever said anything controversial, you could bet your bottom dollar that he wanted to say something controversial. Indhu is very open, but she also laughs at herself. And one of the stories she told was about one of the projects coming up further down the line, which is going to be a collaboration with Stormzy. And as she started into the story, she said, I don't know whether this reflects well or badly on me. And you think that's a self-aware thing to do, but also it is again an inclusive. She's saying all opinions, all options are open here.
It's that strategy when you are the National Theatre to make the venue not just feel open to all physically, but also on a philosophical level. You can talk to me about anything and I'm here to be very frank and candid about it. And also at the same time, remember that theatre is about having fun sometimes. Yeah. And it's that sense of fun that, gets forgotten amongst all the politics or discussions about royal patronage or whatever. At the end of the day, we're just here to watch something that can be quite entertaining or lighthearted and bring joy to different communities at different times. And that was nice for that to be put front and centre, because a lot of those press conferences, especially at the National Theatre, could feel quite heavy and loaded and sort of weighty. But actually this felt like, let's just have some fun with some of these amazing shows coming up over the next couple of years and celebrate all this amazing talent from every jobbing apprentice that's working in a studio all the way up to Paul Mescal leading a rep company at the National. It's all there on show.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was very, very bright and sunny. I think it was nice.
Yeah, and it was, and in that context, it was interesting that she talked about she was asked very specifically about her views, so that, again, to set it in some context, that Heitner very much came in and said he wanted to get audiences back into the theatre. There was a sense at that point that the National was not meeting the demands of its audiences. Rufus's emphasis, quite rightly, was on diversity and changing the audience and welcoming many people in. She very much wants to build on both those things and just welcome everybody in. So keep the audience she's got and widen that audience both nationally and internationally. I was also interested that when she was asked what she wanted audiences to experience, she wanted to offer them entertainment, provocation and joy. And that provocation being in the middle of essentially two things that are all about having fun. I think that is very much a statement of who she is and what she's going to try and do.
It's telling on the press release as well how many productions they say are being filmed for future release via National Theatre at Home or National Theatre Live, i.e. these are productions that we're not just going to show to South Bank audiences, but we're going to make them available for worldwide audiences via streaming or in cinemas, or both. Being conscious of the fact that the National Theatre might sit in the middle of London, but it goes out to over 180 countries and 90% of schools.
Which is amazing.
Incredible.
Worldwide.
That force.
Extraordinary influence.
Yeah, I think that was, again, it felt like a very positive note in a very sort of, admittedly, it can be quite a sombre time for UK theatre. One of the oddly sort of like negative moments came when the co-chief executive, Kate Vara, said that it's almost impossible to do regional touring at the moment for a big venue like the National Theatre unless you have support from the Arts Council or DCMS. Thankfully, the National has 2 tours out at the moment. It's got Warhorse, which is obviously lighting up every venue it could ever touch, but also James Graham's Dear England is going out on tour later this year. It's fantastic for the National Theatre to be reaching communities through touring, but saying how constrained they can feel unless they've got the support to do that did feel like a slight sense of, not everything is perfect as much as we want to have some fun with this.
Yeah, and the other statistic, which we'll just, set out and leave there, is that when the National Theatre was founded, Arts Council support amounted to 50% of its income. And now it amounts to 15% of its income. And the gap has been filled by private philanthropy. And Kate Vara was very keen to say that mixed economy of theatre between private philanthropy, the government and audiences is a superpower. And you can see that. I mean, you can see that is you're neither under government control nor entirely at the mercy of private philanthropy. But that feels a bit imbalanced for all she presented it in a positive way. But you did have a feeling of a kind of new dawn. I mean, there was a logo with red and orange on it, and it said a new chapter, which feels right, turning the page to a new chapter. And there was also in the questions that arose very positive reaction to the support that the theatre is receiving from the royal family, because the question of it being the Royal National Theatre came up, and the fact that the Queen is the patron and has been very actively involved in helping raise the theatre's profile, but also in terms of the support of the culture, Secretary Lisa Nandy. And she too has really been putting her weight behind a lot of the ventures that they're doing. So that all felt buoyant, actually. And before we get into the specifics, the other emphasis that they made, there's a lot about the idea of the internationalism of the National Theatre, so that they've announced 2 partnerships with American theatres, with BAM and with The Shed, where National Theatre productions will be seen. But also that there's a lot of emphasis on building new audiences for the future, family audiences. They've already announced that Ballet Shoes is coming back this Christmas, but a schools programme that's extended and serious and really taking theatre out into schools, a co-partnership with the Unicorn Theatre to take shows out. So that there is a real consciousness of putting attention into building a young audience, which, again, I think was new.
The other thing that struck me as a theme was the idea of teamwork and collaboration. And Kate Vara spoke to us after the press conference. And, she's the executive director and the co-chief executive, and Indhu is also co-chief executive. And she was saying how since COVID, it's become far more apparent the vital role of people like the executive director in allowing venues to stay afloat, because they're the ones having to do the heavy lifting with the philanthropy. And as much as the director or the artistic director gets to be the one sort of like revealing all the exciting new shows, the executive director is the one that has to keep the lights on to a large extent. And it's nice that those two work so solidly in tandem, and Kate Vara got her time to talk about the next chapter, as well as Indhu getting the chance to sort of introduce herself as the new director of the National Theatre. So yes, that bodes very well that they seem to get on and have a very strong rapport at a very challenging time for venues like the National Theatre. So,
and this possibly seems slightly soppy to say, but it did seem to me that there was, one of the, I do remember the Nicholas Heitner press conference where he called out, let's say, all the white male stale aspects of theatre. And it was a room at that point full of older white men and not many women. And I did think there was a different energy because you've got people running the theatre who are women. There are obviously more reporters who are women now. A lot of the season, the programming involves women writers, women directors. It just has subtly altered, and the sense of warmth between Kate Vara and Indhu is palpable, that they obviously really get on as people as well as programmers.
Shall we get on to talking about some of the shows and some of the
Probably
stars?
It's all quite
Put some
exciting.
meat on those bones, yeah. Oh,
Go on, you start.
Oh, right. So, Indhu's first production is going to be Bacchae, which is another Greek classic. We've done a lot of talk about Greek classics over the last 6 months on this podcast. So it's a new adaptation of Euripides by Nima Talegani, who is a writer on Heartstopper, the huge sensational Netflix series, putting her spin on a tale of revelry and theatre and opulence and joy. So I think it's going to be quite a nice one to start with. It's got a very lovely cast as well, with Claire Perkins, who Indhu has worked with before, but also
James McArdle.
friend of the pod and Sarah's.
Can do no wrong.
Yeah.
Obviously, when I saw, in fact, I'm also very fond of Claire, and so that when I saw those two names on the cast list, I thought amazing. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because that is the big splashy starting play. Again, looking to the past, I think there's a sense in which artistic directors feel the need to make their mark on the Olivier. I think Heitner did Henry V. With Rory Kinnear as his first. And certainly I remember Rufus did Every Man with Chiwetel Ejiofor, which was brilliant in a version by Carol Andolfi. So that sense of owning the space, I think, is important. And it does follow the patterns of the past while being quite different. And it's the first time there's been a debut play
On the Olivier stage.
So
history is made, yeah.
History making and exciting.
It's also nice that Indhu is a director that has conquered the Olivier stage, because she did The Father and the Assassin, which was a huge hit. So she knows that space and she knows how to work it. So there's no question marks there about can she get to grips with the Olivier, which is a question that has bugged directors throughout the decades. You know that she can, and you know that she can make something big happen there. So hopefully Bacchae will be a strong start.
Yeah, and she said how she loved that space and how excited she is to be working in that space. So that leads us very neatly into the next big play, which is a Hamlet directed by the National Theatre's Deputy Artistic Director, Robert Hastie, who has previously run Sheffield Theatres. And you might say that there are an awful lot of Hamlets around at the moment, but it is great that Shakespeare is making its mark on the national stage. It would have been very odd not to have a Shakespeare production in the first season, and it's got exciting casting.
Yes, Olivier Award winner Hiran Abisekera, who was in Life of Pi. Brilliant, best thing in Life of Pi aside from the puppets, I'd say. He basically treated every theatre he went to like a jungle gym.
Yeah.
I can imagine it'll be an incredibly studious take, but also a fun take on Hamlet. Robert Hastie did Standing at the Sky's Edge, which was obviously a huge hit in the Olivier, but also did Operation Mincemeat. So he was the director for that, which is now lighting up Broadway. So he's someone that's got a great sense of timing and sense of space. It'd be very intriguing to see what makes this Hamlet different to the three that the RSC are doing.
Yes.
And then there's one down in Chichester with Giles Terrera as well. So it's a very sort of like busy Hamlet year. How this one is different will be very intriguing to see. But it's got a fantastic supporting cast, because you've also got Alistair Petrie playing Claudius, and the ensemble also involves people like Francesca Mills, Aisha Darker, all wonderful talents. So this could be a very different Hamlet to ones we might have seen before. Hopefully it is, so it can stand in its own space.
The other theme looking across the season is that part of the National's role is to introduce a generation of talent. And the casting, in as far as we've got it, is really exciting, and it's drawing attention to actors who are going to be the ones that we'll talk about as the talents of their generation. And I think he is definitely somebody you want to see as Hamlet. It's really interesting. And of course it is the part they unveiled a tiny little trailer of him sitting with a skull and saying, everybody's looked in their mirror and said it, which of course is to be or not to be. And it's fun, and it gives a sense of, again, the approachability of theatre, the idea of the ease of entry points, which I think will be, fascinating going forward.
So then coming up also later this year, we've got Playboy of the Western World, which is also going into the Littleton after Hamlet. Directed by Catriona McLaughlin, who is the artistic director of the Abbey Theatre in Dublin. A bit of a Derry Girls reunion, because you've got Siobhan McSweeney and Nicola Coughlan reuniting. Nicola Coughlan also having a huge hit with Bridgerton. Yeah, it'll be very exciting to see John Millington Synge's play back. When was the last time it was in London?
It feels a long time. We should have looked that up in advance. I don't actually know, but it feels a long time, and it will, it is. So the other thing Indhu talked about a lot was trying to get the balance of classic plays, new plays. There's a lot of plays. There are 9 new plays in this season of 16 productions that have been announced. And but Playboy of the Western World is clearly a classic that is ready to be looked at again and looked at through a new light. And that co-production with the Abbey is interesting, because that's another sub-theme of the National wanting to make work with other theatres and to have productions that have lives in other regional and international theatres. So I think that I look forward to that.
There's a lot of Irish talent, in fact,
Yes.
across the season. Something I said to Indhu, and she was like, "Oh yes, there is." Because you've also then got Aidan Turner, who is going to be starring in Les Liaisons Dangereuses, directed by Marianne Elliott, which is following in
Very
Littleton
interesting.
in 2026. Also joined by Lesley Manville, who you've got a special fact about.
Yes, so I only know this interesting fact because Indhu announced it, but Lesley Manville was in the original production of Liaisons Dangereuses, which was put on by the RSC, interestingly. That original cast was Juliet Stevenson, Alan Rickman and Lindsay Duncan. And Lesley Manville played the sex-hungry ward, Cecile. So she had a small part in that. We're presuming she will have a bigger role in this.
Yes,
And
casting TBC.
Exactly. But the other thing we do know is that Monica Barbaro, who was so brilliant as Joan Baez in A Complete Unknown, is also in the cast. So that will be, that I think that's, again, in terms of making stars and seeing who's interesting, she's a really smart bit of casting.
It's a busy year for Lesley Manville because she's making her Broadway debut in Oedipus. Yeah. So clearly she's heading to New York and then jetting straight back to the National Theatre in spring next year. She's also really lovely to interview at the Olivier Awards. I mean, everyone's going to be lovely to interview after they've won an Olivier Award, but she was particularly nice. So yes, big fans of that production. And then also, I think it's this very packed Littleton season because you've got 2 more shows or 3 more shows really. So first of all, you've got another production of Carol Churchill's Cloud 9, directed by Dominic Cook, which is coming up next year. Great to see Carol Churchill being given main stage presence.
So pleased about that. And, you know, that was another discussion about the idea of plays that deserve to become part of the canon. And Carol Churchill absolutely should be part of the canon. I have a suspicion that she doesn't get produced as much as she might because people think she's hard to sell. But Cloud9 is an amazing play and deserves recognition for its prescience and its brilliance, and that combination of her play with Dominic Cooke, who's such a sensitive and intelligent director, I just think will be fabulous. And I am really pleased that's back. And skipping ahead, can I skip ahead slightly?
Well, they really mapped out some very exciting things down the line, because in 2027, rep companies return to the Littleton stage with A Whistle in the Dark and Death of a Salesman, both featuring Oscar nominee and all-round Hollywood superstar Paul Mescal returning to the London stage to make his National Theatre debut. He's playing Biff in Death of a Salesman, which is directed by Rebecca Frecknell.
He's knocking off another classic.
And Catriona McLaughlin is returning to the National to direct Tom Murphy's A Whistle in the Dark, which you were very excited about when you first saw, because you love that play.
It says something tragic about my sense of priorities that on a press release that's listing Lesley Manville, Aidan Turner, brilliant new shows, brilliant new writing, the thing I get most excited about is a return of Whistle in the Dark, which is a play by Tom Murphy. And I don't want to put people off it by saying that it's bleak beyond all measure, but my memory of it is bleak beyond all measure, but so utterly brilliant. I remember seeing it at the Royal Court, and I told Indhu this, just sitting in silence when it ended, because I was so overwhelmed by how brilliant it was. And I don't really know why Tom Murphy isn't much done in the UK. So I am incredibly excited about that, even though I have to wait till 2027 for it to happen. And I think that idea of having both Paul Mescal in two plays, where he will play contrasting characters, and also having rep in the Littleton is thrilling, really.
Indhu was saying that one of the questions that she got asked a lot from actors when she was preparing her season was, can you bring back rep? Because stage actors love the possibility of playing multiple roles across the same time, because it allows them to flex so many different muscles. We saw that at the Almeida when we did they had the double bill of Roots and Look Back in Anger, so it would be great for the National to do the same. And they've got two further productions as well for 2027. They're going to be running in rep as well, so that's going to be a big bumper rep year, and hopefully the start of a rep tradition for the National once more.
That's clearly it is about finances, isn't it? That they at the press conference they were quizzed about whether you could introduce rep in the other theatres as well, and I think the truth is the Dorfman's never been a rep theatre. It was the Littleton, the Olivier. Indhu just said that actually the Littleton, because the way the backstage functions, is the easiest to do rep in, because of you can store the sets and you can bring them in. So that seems a really good compromise and a good start.
Any theatre nerd should look up how the Littleton backstage area works, because it is one of the most interesting feats of theatre architecture ever. Yeah,
and there is a whole theatre behind it, because when I did in lockdown, when they filmed the Romeo and Juliet with Jessie Buckley and Josh O'Connor, literally with a closed stage at the front, they closed the curtain and then used all the space at the back, and it's double space, isn't it? And it's amazing. So yeah,
so that's dusting off the Littleton. Pretty bumper couple of years coming up. But back in the Olivier, we've got Ballet Shoes, which they've already announced, returning for Christmas. Then into 2026, it's a new play, actually autumn 26. So there's a big gap that we have no idea what might be coming in early 2026 in the Olivier. The Story by Tracy Scott Wilson, so an American play now having its British premiere, with Letitia Wright, known probably to most people is the new Black Panther in the MCU, starring. So another big juicy new play on the Olivier stage. So that's two big juicy new plays on the Olivier stage,
and a big new juicy debut as well. That's Letitia Wright's debut at the National, and again, a true rising star, big in cinema. It's all about giving those touch points of people wanting to come and see people on a stage. And one of the other interesting side points that Indhu made was that we talk a lot about having Hollywood stars on the stage, but she in future would be really interested in having Bollywood stars and Hollywood stars, and that idea of having a worldwide view. She talked about wanting to create plays that weren't state of the nation plays, but state of the world plays. And that, again, I think is a change of emphasis, and will be really exciting to see how it develops.
So, and then the winter of 2026, a new take on The Jungle Book, which Indhu herself is directing, with puppetry by Finn Caldwell and Nick Barnes, the dynamic duo that seem to be reinventing the world of puppetry every year without fail. Their biggest hit, I guess, recently would be something like Life of Pi, now coming back probably to gift us with a whole jungle's worth of brilliant puppets. So I think that's going to be a huge monster production next Christmas.
That reminds me of something I want to say when we're talking about the Bacchae, that I'm really thrilled to see that the Bacchae has got choreography by Kate Prince, who is of Zoo Nation fame and who I have long thought was one of our very best choreographers. So that's another new creative being brought into the theatre.
Was your mental link there going from jungle to Zoo Nation to Kate Prince?
I'm really sorry about that. That was a complete round thing. And it's actually even more complicated because Akram Khan, another dance maker I like, made the Jungle Book. But
he did, yes.
So sorry for the roundabout ways of my brain.
Well, here's my segue of the day for me, in the creatives and directors that I've adored. Anthony Lau, who was responsible for a very iconoclastic take on The Crucible at Sheffield Crucible, is now making his National Theatre debut in a new production of Terence Rattigan's Man and Boy with Ben Daniels. So that's the first show opening at the Dorfman next year. Huge on every level, and I think Anthony Lau is one of our rising star directors, and now being gifted a play like a Rattigan play with a star like Ben Daniels is fantastic. And Indhu actually said, I never thought I'd be programming a Rattigan play in my first season at the National Theatre, but it was Anthony Lau that came to her and said, look, I've got this great idea, can we make this work? And now it's her opening Dorfman show.
I agree about Anthony Lau. I think he's such an interesting director, and the fact he wants to do Rattigan is always brilliant when directors want to do something. And it's that the other quality of the season is that there are new things coming in and new ideas, but there's also links that Indhu has made throughout her career are being honoured. So another new piece coming into the Dorfman is a play by Winston Pinnock, and Indhu said she felt it was really important that she had a play by Winston Pinnock in her season, and incredibly important playwright. The play obviously is being written, but is about, sounds exciting because it's called The Authenticator, and it's about a family's hidden past. That always works. I love, family dramas where something's uncovered, and I love her writing. So I think that's exciting coming up. That, again, hasn't got a date to it just yet.
No, with another rising star director who is National Theatre Artistic Associate Miranda Cromwell.
Yeah.
Also one of our big leading lights. I'm sure it won't be too long before she's sort of running a venue somewhere,
yeah.
Hopefully. And then another new play as well in the Dorfman, so back-to-back new plays by the looks of it, with Carmen Nazar's Samira, which Indhu actually worked on when she was at the Kiln, which was a previous venue, now being brought to the National's Dorfman stage. Not very much known about that, but it's about a young Syrian blogger who is not all that she seems, which is a great tagline. I think it's set during the Arab Spring. So yes, very open-ended at the moment, but great again to see back-to-back new plays being put in the Dorfman, because I think that's one of the things the Dorfman excels at, is giving writers a more intimate space to try out plays, knowing they're not having to fill 800 or 1,000 seats or whatever. They can make stuff work for a smaller audience.
Yeah, the other interesting bit of programming in the Dorfman is a musical version of Pride that's being directed by Matthew Waters, who directed the film. Yeah, and that's interesting, and it is co-production with Sherman Theatre in Cardiff, and that's interesting to have a small space used for a big show, because that very much is a State of Britain show. And I think I'm intrigued by that, you know, the different ways that you use theatres and how you configure them is always interesting in terms of how an artistic director defines their position. And so putting a musical in the Dorfman, I think, is a statement of intent.
It's one of the few productions that they've announced with a commercial partner, which is P&P Productions, who are the ones that have shepherded it onto the stage for the last almost decade, I believe.
Yeah,
it's been waiting for a home and for the right moment for a while, so it's nice that it's found that, and it's nice also that it's cementing that link between a Welsh venue and an English venue, because at the moment, you know, we've got Nye coming up over the summer, which is another co-production between a Welsh venue and an English venue. Again, it's what the National Theatre should be there for, is honouring those links between the different nations. And yes, very intrigued. And then also another intriguing proposition that's going to probably take a bit of a while to come, it's coming in 2027, is a new production by Punch Drunk at the Dorfman. No idea what that could look like or how it's going to manifest. I know they've got that binaural sound show on in Greenwich recently, Viola's Room, but how this might resemble that is all up in the air. But lovely that the National working with Punch Drunk and honouring the vital role of immersive theatre, what that can do in terms of bringing in new audiences and how they can interact with the space. So yeah, again, we can reconvene in 2 years' time to see what that might be.
Yeah, well, there are some interesting partnerships emerging, because one of the things that they discussed was the way in which small companies are innovative, and the idea that the National can learn from them and they can give them support. So they're also introducing partnerships with Middle Child and Lung, and that's new, I think. Yeah. And I like the idea of that two-way conversation going on and support going to those small companies, which, you know, as we know at the moment in the theatre ecology, it is really hard for them to develop. And so it's a chance for them to do that. And also it's introducing a different texture into how you perceive the National, I think.
Because Lung and Middle Child have been around for a fair while, and they have produced some of the best small-scale and touring shows of the last decade in UK theatre, especially at off-West End and fringe venues. It's almost a question of how do you turn those sorts of companies into the next Complicité or the next Cheek by Jowl. It takes institutional support by organisations like the National to make that happen, and I love that Indhu has found two of the best companies, and also companies that aren't based in London, and said, look, here's a platform for you, have at it, make something exciting for all of us. So yeah, fingers crossed they're going to be big.
Fingers crossed. You never know how it goes, but all of those things feeding into the ecology of theatre. So they've put an emphasis on the skills centre, on training, on production placements, on all kinds of things that are about feeding the ecology of the future. And they're all quite quiet and don't really get written about in terms of this kind of announcement, because it's always, you know, Paul Mescal or whatever. But they're interesting initiatives and very much building on what's gone before in terms of putting the National at the centre of the way that theatre in Britain works and seeing how it can support other smaller scale work that will grow into bigger scale work. So, yeah.
Two final things that stood out to me at the press conference was that Indhu said that she wanted to make the Dorfman a home for new musicals, plural. So that sounds like it's a commitment to more new musicals coming at some point in the future. When and where is TBC. One of those might be the new show with Stormzy that we spoke about briefly, that details remain scant on that one. But also Kate Vara said something very funny about the fact that the National Theatre has the largest factory in central London because of the huge workshops that sit next to their stages. And it's a huge employer, you know, the biggest employer in the theatre sector in the country, and the role that it can play in apprenticeships and schemes to bring in new creatives and give them the skills required that they can then take out to venues across the nation is so important. But there's so many barriers to allow people to work in central London that you need long-standing schemes to allow that to happen. I know the National now has a new partnership with the Bank of America to help support some of those things. So how that then allows the creatives of tomorrow to start today. Sounds like a corporate slogan there, doesn't it? That's
somebody
something
should employ you to do. It sounds very good.
Yeah, and that's something that they've really placed at the heart of their announcement. It's not just here's the sexy new shows, it's also
Yeah.
here's all the cool things that mean that our shows can actually work in 10-20 years time because of the skill shortage that we're trying to combat.
Yeah, and it did. I mean, the whole thing. I mean, you never know how things turn out. I mean, in preparation for this, I did spend a bit of time looking at first and second season of National Theatre Directors, and you don't know what lands ever.
Hamlet.
So you just never quite know how things are going to turn out. But nevertheless, this felt very optimistic and bright, and a nice counterbalance to the sense that it is a struggle to make theatre. This is very much a positive thing about saying theatre is at the heart of our national life. The national theatre is at the heart of theatre, and just very much emphasising that sense of big ideas, big, generous going forward. Somehow. There was something generous about it. I think that's what I felt about this press conference. There was a generosity of spirit which made you feel very cheered.
There's been a lot of press conferences where I come out and think, gosh, I wish I'd asked about so-and-so or such and such, but I didn't feel that at all with this one. I just felt as though just a very nice celebration of what Indhu's going to put on over the next couple of years. Maybe in part because we haven't got the full date, so we don't know where the gaps might be for future productions and what might be missing or what she's still got up her sleeve that hasn't been announced. There's obviously the lingering questions about ticket prices, which, how are we going to make sure that audiences can get into theatres even if the programming's there for them? Are the ticket prices accessible? And the National naturally has a lot of ticketing schemes, but at the end of the day it can just come down to how much people have got in their wallets for things like theatre. So that's always going to be there. That's going to be a question that will take a few years to answer.
All the harder questions might come later, and she's wise enough to know that if you announce a brilliant season, then it doesn't go well and people don't like the shows and your audience plans don't quite come off, then the questions will get harder. And I've no doubt that given the history of the National Theatre, there will be some tough times ahead. But it was a lovely, buoyant start.
Yes, I think she's going to make those conferences very fun going forward.
Yeah, we'll be booking.
Maybe we'll get a performance by Stormzy next time.
Yeah, that will be really good.
Cool. I think we've given that quite an in-depth appraisal, haven't we, on the day of the announcement? I feel so. Yes. Well,
we probably missed things as well.
We'll probably be told off in the comments for missing out on some big announcement that we've glossed over. But in the meantime, I think we should probably call it a day there and reconvene at another point. I think we might have Indhu on the podcast at some point in the near future. Fingers crossed on that one. Possibly before she takes up the director's mantle, hits the rehearsal room for Bacchae, so she can give us her take on some of these wonderful productions coming up.
But in the meantime, it's goodbye from me, Sarah Crompton.
And a goodbye from me, Alex Wood. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe, leave a comment, rate, and just generally rave about the podcast wherever you can. We're back with normal programming on every Friday, but sometimes we like to shake it up with extra bonus episodes, or we like to respond to some of the breaking news that's happened in the theatre world. So make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode.